Hey guys, welcome back to my shop. Thanks for joining me. I'm Aaron with Aleeknives. Tonight I'm going to teach you how to make another type of knife sheath. This is a fold-over sheath or a taco knife sheath. This is a more traditional style knife sheath. It's more simplistic than my other sheath designs. There's a couple different ways that you can build one of these sheaths with several different options, and I'm going to teach you all of that in the video tonight. And I'm also going to give you some tips that are going to elevate your success and making your first one come out really nice. Alright, let's start with our leather here. This is a vegetable tan leather. I always like to use an undyed vegetable tanned leather to start, and I like a good 8 to 10 ounce leather. That is a fairly thick leather. If you guys have ever played with leather, 8 to 10 ounce is usually used for either saddle making or shoes or knife sheaths and stuff like that. So this is 8 ounce leather right here, and for a fold over sheath, where you're going to make the belt loop of the knife sheath out of one piece of leather, you're going to want to make sure that the inside portion of the leather is nice and clean. So there are portions of this leather where this is still really rough. This would not be a good choice. This portion right here is nice and clean, so you could use this for your belt loop section. You'd have the sheath down here with a long tab that hangs off the top, and this folds over for your belt loop, and this would be exposed. So you would want this to be real nice and clean because you will see this when it's finished. That's option one for building a fold over. The second option is to build your fold over sheath without an incorporated belt loop and to sew a belt loop on the sheath. A typical fold over sheath, if you think about it logically, your sheath design is going to look something like this, right? Where you have a typical knife sheath with your knife in here, okay? So in order to get that design, your sheath is going to look like this, your template, right? Because it's an identical copy on both sides. This is one way of doing the fold over, and then you would take another piece of leather right here and you would stitch it on. The other way to do a fold over sheath would be, if you have your sheath here, like this, you could build your second half with a long tab of leather that comes off like this. And then that way when you fold it over, you could take this tab and fold it down and stitch it right here, and then you have your belt loop. And the leather, this leather strip right here is incorporated into your pattern, and then you don't have to sew it across the top because it's a loop right here. And that's one way of doing it. I don't prefer to do this because I feel like there's a lot of waste when you go to cut this pattern out of your piece of leather. Since you have to cut this out and then cut a long tab out, you end up with this scrap here, and you end up with ultimately scrap here. And that to me seems like a lot of waste when I can cut out a square or a rectangle, and I can get this pattern shape and then just cut a strip of leather for my belt loop and then sew it on. I prefer to go this method over this method of pattern. This is the theory of sheaths right here. I don't make a pattern for these knives. I'm going to show you how I lay my knives out to make one of these sheaths where I don't waste time making one of either of these patterns. If you do it my way, this way, you don't have to make a pattern. If you want to do it this way, you have to take the time to draw it out and make a pattern. If you want to do it this way, I'll show you a real simple way to do this where you can just lay your knife on the leather, trace out a block on the leather, and you can wet form the leather and then trim off the excess later. And I'm going to teach you how to do that right now. Hey guys, here's a quick 2-second call to action. If you guys are liking me and what I'm doing for you on my channel, do me a favor and click that share button underneath the video and share it on Facebook or some other social media platform that you guys use. That would help me out greatly if you guys would help get my videos out there to your friends and stuff, because if you're liking it, chances are they might too. Thanks guys. I'm going to show you a real easy way to lay out your knife on a piece of leather. So first off, you decide if you're going to make a right or a left-handed sheath. If you're going to make a right-handed sheath, this is your belt loop side. You're going to lay your knife just like this, okay? Because you want the edge of the sheath to be on the cutting edge. You want the edge of your sheath, the sewn part, to be on the cutting edge of the knife. Okay, so I'm going to give myself a solid inch here and a solid inch on this side of the knife. Okay, so I have an inch of material here, an inch of material here, and the next thing I do is decide how high I want the sheath to come on the knife handle. So I think this is a good height right here for the sheath to stop on my knife handle. That covers a good portion of my handle, but it leaves a good portion of it hanging out so I can grab the knife to extract it from the sheath. And then I just take the knife and I roll it over like that. Okay, so that was pretty easy. So you could see the center line of the sheath. Okay, so I've got an inch. I just roll it up. That's the center line, and I lay it the other direction, and I come out equally an inch on the other side of the knife. Okay, now this is pretty easy. Since I've got those two lines right there, I just lay this out, and I draw my line up, intersect right there with my T, and then I can cut this out right here. Real simple. Okay, whoops, hit the camera there. Nothing crazy. Your lines don't even have to be straight yet. All right, so there is our sheath material. We didn't have to make a template or anything. We just used the knife. Here's my first tip for elevating your success on one of these sheaths. You don't have to do this, but I find that it does make a better sheath. If you just go ahead and you find a center point here, there we go, right there. You just find a center point in your knife sheath and you draw yourself a line and you use what's called a V-gouge. This tool right here cuts a gouge in the leather. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove some material right off that center line, like so, okay? And what that's going to do is when I fold it over, it's going to allow the fold to be a little tighter. And it's going to hold that knife a little more snug. You don't have to do this, like I said, but I find it does help. So I remove a little bit of material right off that inside fold. Okay, I've moved you guys around to this side of the table here because I'd like you to see this process of putting this in water. The first thing I've done is I've taken my knife and I just wrapped it in some cling wrap, some regular cellophane, and I make sure to run it all the way off the tip so I can kind of twist it up just so that no moisture gets in on that steel when I wet form this. This is nothing more than a plate of warm water, and then I take my leather and I submerge it. Nothing crazy here, guys. There we go. I love the sound of the leather when it sizzles. You can see it just sizzling like crazy. See all the bubbles coming out of the leather? It's pretty cool. Leather is so much fun to work with. This will soak up water for a while, so, you know, I mean, it just depends on how much you want to wet form it. I like these sheaths to fit really nice and tight, so I let it soak up a good fair amount of water. It takes about a minute. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. All right, guys. We've waited about a minute or so, and we've got our leather in here, so we're just going to pick it up and let it drip off. You could squeegee off some of that water. It's got plenty of moisture in it to do what we want to do. There we go. Move that out of the way here. Now the first thing I like to do is take my leather and I fold it right in half. So let's just do that. Fold it in half, press down on that seam. Real nice and tight. And squeeze it together. Because you're wanting to get this real tight around the back of the knife where the blade is and everything. You just want it real nice and tight. Now, if I hadn't cut that groove, that would be thicker. It would be thicker because the leather wouldn't allow me to push it down that tight like that. So like I said, I just push it down, open it back up, make sure that I'm right in line with everything. And now, I don't like how the leather's turning like this, so I give it a kind of a pull and a twist on this side, and I can correct that right there, okay? The leather is wet, so you can still correct it. Okay. All right, so it's folded in half now. That's good. That's what we want. Let's go ahead and enter our knife into the equation. Now remember, we want the tip of the knife to be about an inch up from the bottom, okay? So let's see here. So when we laid this out, we put about a finger's width, that first knuckle, to the tip of the knife, okay? That gives us a little bit of room to work with when we go to trim off the excess. Okay, so you just put that knife in there just like that, okay? Now, one thing you really want to make sure is that the back of the knife is seated fully against the back of the leather. That's the most important thing to do on this, because you want the back of the knife right in this crease right here for this next part. So you get your knife in there, and then I like to establish exactly where the knife's going to sit in the sheath by pinching it right here where the guard of the knife is. And that's the first thing that I do, is work this area right here so that I know where the knife indexes into the leather. Just in case it moves or something, I can put it right back in the same spot. So that's where we're going to go, right there. And then I'm just going to take this, and you pull on the leather, on both sides of the leather equally, and you squish your fingers together to form it around the shape of your knife. You don't really have to worry about forming it around the blade. We're going to get that shape later in the process. You know, you want it to be tight and flat, but this is the part that you want the detail of the knife during the wet forming process, okay? So I normally do this right here. Now when you look in here, I've got that extra inch of material. Now I left that much material so that I could put clips on this to hold the leather. These are just paper clips you would use in an office. I just put some clips on there just to hold it. It's not to do anything but just hold it in place. That's it. Those are the clips' purposes. And then we're going to wet form the top of this sheath. Now I had kind of a finger groove down here, so I am focusing on this finger groove area. And keep in mind, this is the side of the knife that you're going to see, because this is going to be a right-handed knife, so the belt loop's going to go on this side. So I really want to make sure this side stands out in the wet forming procedure. So when I come in here, I'm going to come around to show you up close. So when I come in here with this, what I'm doing without using my fingernail is I'm pressing right up in there. I'm pushing the leather down and in right there so that you can see the knife through the leather. That's the most important part, okay? And then you're going to squeeze that leather right around the knife handle to get as much definition that you can get out of it. Right there. Now, I'm going to show you something out here where I'm going to cut off this leather. If I do this with my fingernail, do you see? You probably see now. See how my fingernail can really easily dig into that? You'll see that forever. You can't rub that out. You can't get that out of there. Once your fingernail creases it, it's done. So when you're working this, you make sure you use the fleshy part of your finger and don't ever roll over and get your fingernail on there, because you will see that. Okay. And that's really good right there, guys. I mean, now I've pulled the leather. These type of sheaths have a tendency of creating an area right here in the knife handle. So the way that I get around that is I pinch right here and I pull the leather in this direction which sucks it up to the knife handle. The whole time that I'm doing this, I'm pulling the leather to stretch it towards my fingers like this. And once I get it where I want, I just take a couple passes up to smooth out the leather like that. It's good. It's nice and smooth. I've got enough material here to do everything that I want to do. I make sure that this is nice and flat. Now before I set this up to dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one more clamp right here, right on the tip, and I'm going to extract the knife, and then I'm going to lay this in a position where I could take this, make sure that this is nice and flat as you can get it. And I'm going to take this knife sheath and I'm going to lay it somewhere flat so it can dry. Okay, leave those clips on there, and ultimately it'll dry with that shape in it. And then, now this will shrink slightly too. The next part that we're going to do is we're going to put the knife in there, we're going to draw the shape of the knife on the inside of the sheath, and we're going to determine how much to cut off on the outside, and then we'll cut another strip of leather to sew in between this layer and this layer as the welt to protect the sheath from the cutting edge of the knife. And then I'll teach you how to lay this out and how to stitch it all together, and also how to put the belt loop on, and a couple things that are procedural things that you're going to want to do to get this right. This is the first step, is to wet form this leather, and I do it with very minimal cutoff, guys. I mean, you can see I'm only going to cut off just a little strip of leather there. It's a good way to do it. Hey guys, part 2 of this video is ready. It's right here. Click right here and go watch the second part.